eHaryana, all the distinguished dignitaries in the dais, and the illustrious and distinguished guests in this seminar today. Rajesh talked about CSC in particular. I'll start with speaking about power sector since I'm looking after that sector right now. And how ICT can be immensely useful in terms of driving the power sector. In power sector, I'll start by saying that essentially two things are important. One is the political will to be able to turn around the sector. Because there are huge problems in power sector. Many of you may be aware of that. And the second is the operational efficiency of the sector. Now, one is uncontrollable variable, which probably at this stage, as officer administrators, probably I would not like to touch upon that. The second most important thing is that how can you improve the operational efficiency using the ICT? And that is where ICT has tremendous role. We have tried it in some respect and we are still continuing to try it. And we are very hopeful that the turnaround which is expected to happen in power sector, especially in distribution utilities, it can be immensely useful. I'll at the end touch briefly about the role of CSC also in the distribution utilities, which I think has huge potential. I was constantly in touch with Mr. Singh, ACSIT, and we did a pilot in Barwala where the power sector or the distribution utility also participated and we had very encouraging results. And if the actual rollout happens in a sustainable manner of CSC, I think this can create tremendous amount of leverage and benefit to the distribution utilities as well. So I start by saying about the vision mission of our department. I'll try to correlate it with the, I will not pontificate too much on the power sector per se, but how ICT can be useful in power sector. The vision, of course, is how do we make available adequate quality and reliable power in a sustainable fashion in power sector in the state, contributing to the acceleration of research. Today, we all know that power sector is considered to be the backbone of the economy. In fact, the capital output ratio, the elasticity ratio you see between the GDP growth and the growth in the power sector is almost close to unity. And therefore, it is almost synonymous that if you want to grow in accelerated fashion in the GDP, in the economy, then power sector has to grow in a commensurate fashion. And to be able to achieve that, we have to be able to supply reliable quality power to all categories of consumers. That includes domestic, agriculture, industry, commercial, and so on and so forth. Now, I will not go into details. The point is that we are trying to achieve this by creating additional power supply sources, either in-house or outside. We are trying to project the long-term power demand and how do we meet that demand through additional supplies, and also create relevant evacuation infrastructure to be able to take that power to all categories of consumers. Now, even while we are doing it, the most important, I'll come to the last, which is very, very critical and in which ICT has a tremendous role to play, that is to eliminate the gap between average cost of supply and average revenue realized. Today, on an average, in Haryana, for example, we are buying power at 4 rupees per unit approximately. And the losses are about 30%, technical commercial losses, which makes the power cost about 6 rupees. We have some operational maintenance expenses at, say, about 50 to 75 paisa. So the power costs about 6 rupees, 50 to 6 rupees, 75 paisa. And then we are distributing that power, the average revenue realized from consumer on an average basis throughout Haryana, the deficit will be close to or more than 1.5 rupees per unit. So which means every unit which we sell, we are losing money. So the challenge is how do we bridge this gap? How do we effectively turn around the sector? And that is where the role of ICT becomes very, very critical. Now the areas where ICT we have found can be extremely useful is customer services, metering, billing collection, energy audit, vigilance, and of course the business processes. Yesterday Secretary IT was talking about very important thing, that how do we approach ICT in finding solutions to our problems. One is the reform-oriented approach, the proactive approach, in which we are trying to, traditionally in 80s when the ICT started, we had been hearing about this, that the first step was that we converted manual operation into digital or computerized operations. We put some computers. Even today, I would not name the state, the particular state in electricity sector when I was handling power in a joint secretary Ministry of Power. The data which is collected from the villages, it is loaded on the Excel sheet, and then as such it is displayed in the head office. And where the people who are doing it, they consider it drudgery because it is double the effort. You first collect the data on manual and then you try to enter or key it in the computer and then again try to display it without making any valuable or useful taking advantage of the data. And if that happens, then obviously ICT is a non-starter. So the most important thing is that even while we install hardware, even while we are trying to use the data, how do we use the data? How do we change the user environment? And it was also talked about business process reengineering. Business process reengineering might sound to be a very difficult term, but as I understood in very, very simple terms, business process reengineering and ICT would mean ICT redefines the work process and workflows. How? We call it business process reengineering. Who does what? Prior to ICT, who does what? And who does what after ICT? So that is business process reengineering. Invariably, when we use ICT, then these processes, who does what, this changes. There is a radical change. And that is what the organization has to be geared to be able to effectively use ICT. So in all these services, which I very briefly touch upon, this business process reengineering is almost an integral component of using ICT in the sector. Now, first is the online services. When I talk of IT and ICT, for example, centralized call center. Now, today we have a centralized call center which we have now made applicable to both the utilities in the eHaryana. So a consumer typically has to call the call center, registers his complaint, and then expects solution to his problem, because the customer call center then in turn is connected to what is known as FRT or fault repair teams. And through the fault repair teams, they constantly touch base with them and find out whether the problem has been resolved, and after that a response is sought and that is conveyed to the consumer. Now in this entire process, the most important thing is that how do you organize your database? Typically, for example, in our utilities, the unique code on the basis of which the call center operates is the 11-digit unique account number of the consumer. Now typically when the, let's say, light goes out in the evening and the consumer calls a call center, the call center operator will ask him, what is your consumer ID? What is your consumer number? He will not remember his consumer, which is the alphanumeric 11-digit code. So we decided that we have to collect data, and today almost, as yesterday the Chief Minister also talked about, 90% of the people use mobile telephone, even in rural urban areas. So why can't we have, let's say, a mobile number or a landline number? One of either of the two, I think, has to be there in almost every home, practically 90% in rural urban areas. So we have tried to organize the database. Why I am trying to highlight this is that the collection of database or the existence of an authentic database is most critical to use of ICT and delivering value services or delivering value to your activities which you are doing. So for example, now we have collected that. Hopefully within a month we will be able to see, so that whenever a customer calls, he doesn't have to remember he doesn't have to in the dark of the night when the light goes out, he doesn't have to take out his bill, try to identify his user ID. He can simply mention about his landline number or the mobile number, and then straight away database will be able to pull out the details and able to reach the FRT, field repair teams, fault repair team, and then to be able to find a solution to the problem. Now, similarly, for example, even while we are doing call center, another interesting thing we found out that whenever there is a blackout which happens, let's say a feeder is down, then typically hundreds of calls come to the call center is flooded. We did an audit of the call center. Now the call center begins to handle all these hundreds and thousands of calls. They are just not able to handle the load. The waiting time increases, the services suffer, and therefore we try to map the feeders in each of the areas with typical colonies or areas which they serve, and try to link the consumer through his mobile number, landline number to the feeder and then to the areas. So whenever, for example, our operating center tells the call center that such and such feeder is down for 2 hours. So all the colonies which are served by those feeders, they are shown in red color on the screen of the call center operator. Whenever that caller calls that number, immediately it tells him that your light will be available in 2 hours. Because the feeder is down, people are attending it. So the entire productivity of the call center improved. We did a pilot in Gurgaon, and we are going to do it in all the circles. So what I am trying to emphasize is that even while we are trying to use the ICT services, most important issue is that how do you organize your database on the basis of which you will leverage your ICT to be able to deliver better services to the consumers. Now similarly, we have created SMS gateway and email now. Earlier we had a grievance addressal system in which which was internet based. But now we have created SMS gateway because, especially in rural areas, the users or consumers may not be able to use the internet based services, and therefore they can always mention their grievances in the SMS, on which a response will be, or a confirmation number will be given to the consumer, and once the grievance of the consumer has been redressed, thereafter SMS goes to the consumer saying that as per the fault repair team, your grievance has been redressed. Now it is for the consumer to call back or SMS back whether it is true, because there is a possibility that, because we will be monitoring as part of the performance management system whether the FRT has been able to effectively address how many grievances in how much time. Now suppose there is a fake reply on the part of the FRT, that can easily be verified through the SMS reply of the consumer, and you can always check back and find out whether the grievance has actually been addressed or not. So that is another value addition which we are trying to do through the SMS gateway. Similarly, emails and so on. Another interesting area which I would like to highlight is the online loading of the FIR. Now, whenever consumer theft occurs, then typically what used to happen is a case is made out against the consumer. There is always, and in many occasions we found out there were complaints of irregularities where the officer, whether it is JE, SPO, he will then try to negotiate with the consumer that how much you want to pay, otherwise I am going to make a theft case, and therefore such and such amount will be levied on you, and in addition there will be a criminal case lodged against you, because now we have special police stations where all these electricity theft cases are registered. And there is a very interesting provision in the Electricity Act which says that within 24 hours of detecting a theft, if a complaint is not made to the electricity police station, it is supposed to be mandatory. So maybe after 2 or 3 years of the case, when it goes to the trial, we found out that the court acquits the consumer or the person who was stealing the electricity by saying that this mandatory provision of reporting the complaint within 24 hours was not adhered to. And therefore we introduced this concept of online FIR, where the SP or JE, the moment he detects the theft, there is no question of delaying it. On the same day we have created a format, online format. Every subdivision is connected through internet, and therefore they just enter the bare minimum essentials, and straight away the complaint is lodged to the police station. And in the police station also the case diary has been computerized. So the second round of negotiation which used to take place at the police stations also, that is also eliminated, because the moment the data is entered through the internet from the subdivision to the police station, it enters the case diary. Now the only option with the police station is, or the SHO, that within 48 hours either the person deposits the amount or it has to be converted into an FIR. So the mandatory provision of law is addressed, that within 24 hours a complaint is registered with the police station, and we realized that the recovery in case of theft cases, which was barely 25%, because people never thought that anything serious is going to happen because of the various irregularities which I mentioned. Now the recovery rate has jumped. It has gone to more than 50%. We expect that it will touch close to 80 to 90% in case this process is fully streamlined, because in that case the consumer who is indulging in electricity would very well know that if he does not deposit the amount, then in that case there are every chances of this getting converted into an FIR within 48 hours. And that has tremendously improved the environment. And this is not only in terms of recovering the theft amount, but also in creating a message down the line. It creates a deterrent, because people who are indulging in theft, without any chances of being detected or being penalized, now there is a message which will go down. Now this process has started, it has already started showing results, and we expect to upscale. Similarly, we have started recently online application for new industrial connections. Any connection, industrial connection, even if it is more than 5 kilowatt. We recently done a software, internet-based, where although it is very initial stages, but it has already been launched. And it was done with the help of Heartron, a team which was assembled by Heartron. Fortunately, they have done this job very well, and we have already started receiving applications because we received complaints in many of the industrial areas that typically the industrial consumer, when he approaches for getting a new industrial connection, there were a lot of cases and complaints of corruption. That even before accepting the application, 25,000 rupees are charged or 1,000 rupees per kilowatt in charge and so on and so forth. Now, to be able to address this issue, we started this and we expect, and we have made obviously provision for uploading all the documents which have been duly listed on the website, which need to be uploaded for making the application complete in all respects. If that happens, after that an acknowledgement will come, and then the consumer will be able to even trace the movement of the connection from, let's say, STU to XCN and to GVN and so on, whichever is the competent authority. Now this is a new beginning which we have done. We have already started receiving applications, as I mentioned only 29 so far. But we expect that this will completely transform the process of filing for new connections and eliminating in a big way the irregularity or corruption which was associated with this process. Similarly, the online bill payment facility. Recently, we also started along with the online bill payment facility that a consumer will be able to see or witness his bill on the internet by quoting his account number and see what is the actual bill. So even before the bill is physically distributed, he will be able to see it. The next step, probably which will be at a later stage, which Mr. Malik has been emphasizing, is that, and which probably we hope we'll be able to do, is that where a consumer can be able to generate his own bill by filling in his own readings. We'll do it on a pilot basis, probably in Gurgaon, and where we trust the consumer that instead of the meter reader, there are often complaints about meter reader filling in excess meter reading and all sorts of problems of inflated bills and so on and so forth. Now that can be eliminated if we start it in a pilot way, and of course it needs to be validated because there can be unscrupulous consumers also who might be filling in less readings, and therefore there has to be a back and forth authentication or validation of this process before we actually upscale it. Now similarly, computerized cash collections, this of course we have created. We experienced that number of cases. Typically what happens, that our ex-servicemen leave, which has been outsourced the work of bill collection and also meter reading, they go in a vehicle, they go along with armed guards, they collect the money, then they give to the sub-region office the stubs or the vouchers along with the money, and after that within a 15-day cycle it goes to our Hartron or Department of Electronics centers at the district headquarters. There they get entered, then a complete manifest is prepared and so on and so forth. This entire process or cycle, which can run from 15 to 20 days or even more. There have been many cases of fraud in terms of online reconciliation, checks deposited, checks dishonored, bounced, proper credit entries not made and so on and so forth. Now the computerized cash collection will be in a position where the money which is collected is directly entered into a database. And therefore, it can be directly validated. A computerized print is printed from a central database so that the chances of fraud is almost minimized or eliminated. Now, another interesting thing in this metering, which has been listed here, is that in Maharashtra, for example, Rajesh would know, if not, is there. I discussed with Maharashtra 50,000 consumers out of maybe more than 1 crore consumers constitute 50% of the total energy consumed in the state. And those 50,000 consumers are on automatic meter reading instruments, AMRs, wherefrom the data through a modem is directly collected onto a central server. And we know exactly on a 15-minute interval or a 30-minute interval that how much electricity is being consumed by those heavy-duty consumers. And once that data comes, and it is clearly mandated there that after a month, a 15 days notice is supposed to be given to the consumer to deposit the bill. And precisely it's a monthly billing cycle. So let's say end of the month, the bill is generated, and within 15 days, if the bill is not paid, which also is visible on the central server for those 50,000 consumers. And if the meter reading shows that the consumption is still taking place, then the superintendent engineer of the concerned district is automatically suspended. It's an official order. And because of this, by making effective use of ICT and actively monitoring through a central server, practically the default in these 50,000 consumer has come to nil or eliminated. And we have already started this process in Haryana also, where we started with all the consumers more than 10 kilowatt. Already we have floated the tender. We expect to award that project will be completed within a year and a half, where all the consumers more than 10 kilowatt, and we have about in our case in Haryana, 3% of our consumer constitute 65% of the energy consumed in the state. So at least in that segment, if you use this AMR facility and making use of ICT, then we expect that not only the revenue leakage will be plugged, but we'll be able to have much better realization in terms of revenue and much accurate reading of the meter. Now, next which we are doing is, and which is now coming to the proactive part, I'll just spend a few minutes on that even while we are trying to address consumer grievances, even while we are trying to address the leakages in the revenue through online FIR and through the automatic meter reading instruments using the models and communication technology, most important is, can we utilize this data to be able to proactively plug some of the problems which might arise later on, and then we try to find solution through ICT. For example, recently, Chief Minister told us that there are a lot of problems of inflated billing, and you must address it effectively. We just thought that how exactly we can address it, and we found out that our computerized billing facilities, we can easily generate exception reports, and those exception reports, hard copies, were generated by hard-run DOC at the circle level, and they used to travel to subdivision where they were gathering dust, and sometimes they were not even being attended to. Now we have said, again with the help of Heartron, we have written a software where we immediately transport that data through our server at the subdivision level through the internet, and now at the subdivision level, by applying various filters and using a software, we can easily find out that compared to the normal average of the bills received, let's say for the last 6 months, which are the bills where unusually high bills are being generated. And we can do a pre-audit even before we dispatch those bills to the consumers. And we can always apply a filter whether it is 50% more, 100% more, and so on and so forth. And this, for example, we did in Faridabad and Gurgaon. And substantially, the problems of inflating bills have come down. Now this we, of course, hope to upscale and repeat in almost, it's not difficult at all. So this can be a direct benefit in terms of trying to proactively address some of the issues through the use of ICT, and not merely trying to find solution to the problems once they occur. So this is another very important use of ICT in our entire business process. Now of course ERP, you are all aware, whether it is inventory management, material management, etc. ERP, both in generation company and distribution companies, we are trying to introduce. Now there is an RAPDRP program which I'll very briefly touch upon that. It's a Government of India program, which is a 50,000 crore program. We are doing it in Haryana also. Expect to complete by May 2014. Another very, very potent use of ICT for doing energy audit, energy accounting. Typically in power sector, the most important issue is when the energy is pumped into the system, which energy, how much energy goes where, and where the losses are taking place. If you can exactly track it down right up to transformer level, starting from feeder level, then we can exactly find out where the leakage is taking place and how we can plug it. And this is one program where, for example, we will be using the optical fiber cable connectivity right to subdivision level and the GPRS systems, by which we will be directly getting readings from the transformers about the consumption of electricity, and then correlate it with the help of the bills generated on a particular feeder or a transformer, and then find out where exactly the leakage is taking place. So this is one program I just want to mention, which will have tremendous implications if properly implemented. And we are on a fast track trying to ensure that the timelines of May 2014 are met, and we are able to implement this program, where the energy audit and accounting is the single biggest program in the power sector by making use of ICT to achieve energy audit and energy accounting at every stage, right from the subdivision level to the feeder level to the BT level. Now this is what happens in a APDRP typically, where For example, from the consumer, we can do a spot billing, or through a meter reading instrument, we can directly have the data coming to our central data server. That is called meter data acquisition system. In the meter data acquisition system, through the distribution transformer and substations, we know exactly how much energy is being consumed at the DT level, at the substation level, at the meter level, and the data which is received from the consumers, which also travels to the data center. We can then correlate the two and try to find out where exactly the problem is. And we can track down our aggregate technical and commercial losses. And of course, there are other benefits in terms of geographical information system, network analysis. Once we have mapped our assets through geographical coordinates, we exactly know if a new connection is to be released or a network augmentation is to take place. Then sitting in office, you will know how your network looks like and where exactly you can try to augment or try to release new connections, etc. So this is one program I wanted to mention, which tremendously will use ICT for improving the operational efficiency in the power sector. There is a smart grid pilot in Panipat which is being done with the help of Japanese companies. Here again we are trying to find out that how the time of the use metering can take place to reduce the gap between peak and off-peak. Typically, we have very high consumption in the evening, morning hours. During the day, consumption is very low, and we are always saddled with this problem that how do we handle this surplus power during the day. But if we can have time of the use metering, which now happens partly in the industrial sector, but we will try to do it in the consumer sector, where the consumers can basically regulate their consumption, and that will help in flattening the load curve and in reducing the cost of power purchase and improving the efficiency. Now this is the experiment which we did in Barwala through the CSC, where the reduction in the average billing cases in Barwala, it happened from 564 cases, it went down to 332 cases. Typically, if the meter readers don't visit the actual premises and report that meter premises is locked or the user is not available and so on and so forth, and we have to resort to average billing, which leads to reduction in revenue. Since there is a CSC operator sitting in the village who also undertook the responsibility of meter reading and billing, so this helped us in terms of reducing the average billing cases, and in terms of the collection efficiency, as you can see, from 59% went up to 101%. This is one case. We are very actively and keenly looking at this option of CSC to improve our billing operation, improvement in our collection efficiency, and also in terms of grievance redressal, which at the moment is missing, but we hope that will also be addressed through the CSC. And the most important issue there, of course, will be, at which we are looking at, which Rajesh mentioned, that if we can have very credible connectivity at the village level, which is being planned as part of the optical fiber being spreading up to last panchayat, then of course it can have very tremendous and humongous benefit for the power sector. Now similarly, HPGCL, HPNL, we are trying to do all these operations in terms of ERP and other accounting. Thank you.